Commander Ji-Ho Kim straightened his uniform as he walked through the massive corridors of the Galactic Council chamber. The station orbited Nexus Prime, a neutral world where hundreds of alien species gathered to make decisions that affected trillions of lives across the galaxy. Today marked 50 years since humanity joined this great assembly. Ji-Ho expected celebrations, medals, perhaps some speeches about cooperation and friendship. The chamber itself was enormous, designed to hold representatives from species of all shapes and sizes. Towering insectoids stood beside flowing crystalline beings. Reptilian delegates with scales that shimmered under artificial lights conversed with bird-like creatures whose feathers displayed complex patterns. Ji-Ho had spent a decade here, learning their customs, building relationships, solving problems that seemed impossible to everyone else. Dr. Hannah Lee walked beside him, carrying a datapad filled with statistics. She was humanity's chief xenotechnology advisor, the woman who had helped cure the Andromeda plague that nearly wiped out the Kreshtar hive. Her work had saved 40 billion lives. Today, she smiled, thinking they would finally receive proper recognition. 70% of current council infrastructure uses human designs, Hannah whispered. We've mediated peace in 3 civil wars. They have to acknowledge what we've accomplished. Ji-Ho nodded, but something felt wrong. The usual friendly greetings from other ambassadors were absent. The Quilix delegates avoided eye contact. Even the Luminar representatives, who typically glowed brighter in greeting, remained dim and distant. They took their seats in the human delegation area. The chamber filled quickly, thousands of delegates finding their positions. High Chancellor Vormix, an imposing insectoid whose chitinous armor gleamed under the lights, rose from the central platform. His compound eyes seemed to look everywhere at once. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, Vormix began, his translated voice echoing through the chamber. Today we address a matter of great importance concerning the integration and role of species within our beloved community. Ji-Ho leaned forward. This was it, the recognition they deserved. After careful deliberation spanning many cycles, the Council has enacted Statute 7 Alpha. Vormix gestured, and holographic text appeared above the assembly. This statute establishes clear guidelines for species classification based on cultural maturity, historical contribution, and stability metrics. Hannah's fingers flew across her datapad, pulling up the statute's full text. Her face went pale. Ji-Ho, this can't be right. The statute divided all council species into tiers. Tier 1 species held full voting rights, unlimited trade access, and controlled their own technology. Tier 2 species, classified as auxiliary members, faced restrictions. Limited votes on major decisions. Mandatory technology sharing with Tier 1 species. Trade limitations requiring Tier 1 approval. Humanity was listed as Tier 2. Ji-Ho read the classification criteria 3 times, unable to believe it. Species younger than 10,000 years of spaceflight were automatically Tier 2. Humanity had barely 400 years in space. It didn't matter that they had accomplished more in those 4 centuries than most species achieved in millennia. Ambassador Talveen, the reptilian saurid who served as council speaker, approached the podium. His scales were deep green, marked with age and what humans had mistaken for wisdom. Some may question this decision, he said smoothly. Let me be clear about the reasoning. Young species, despite their enthusiasm and occasional ingenuity, lack the perspective necessary for full council participation. They move too quickly, change too rapidly, and create instability. Several alien delegates nodded agreement. The Saurid Confederacy had existed for 30,000 years. They viewed humanity as children playing with adult tools. Human contributions are noted and appreciated, Talveen continued, his tone dripping with condescension that the translation software couldn't quite hide. However, allowing such influence from a species barely past their planetary infancy sets dangerous precedents. This statute ensures proper order and stability. Jiho felt Hannah's hand grip his arm. They're taking our patents, she whispered urgently. Section 17, Subsection C. All technology developed by Tier 2 species becomes Council common property. But, we need Tier 1 approval to access their databases. The full picture crystallized. Human medical technology that saved billions would be distributed freely to other species. Human engineering that built 70% of Council infrastructure would be copied and used without compensation. But, humans couldn't access advanced Quilix manufacturing techniques or Luminar energy systems without permission that would likely never come. They weren't being honored. They were being robbed. More delegates spoke, praising the wisdom of Statute 7 Alpha. They talked about stability and tradition. They spoke of protecting younger species from themselves. Not one mentioned that human innovations had revolutionized galactic medicine, engineering, and diplomacy. Not one acknowledged that human mediators had prevented wars that would have killed trillions. Jiho watched them carefully. The Kreshtar delegates who humanity had saved from extinction. The Quilix traders whose economy depended on human-designed shipping networks. The Luminar scientists who used human research methods in their own work. All of them sat silent or nodded along with this theft dressed as regulation. Finally, High Chancellor Vormix asked if any delegation wished to formally respond. This was Jiho's moment to object, to argue, to demand fair treatment. Every human in the chamber expected him to fight this injustice. Commander Jiho Kim stood slowly. The chamber quieted, anticipating confrontation. Hannah looked at him with confusion, having prepared extensive arguments and evidence of human contributions. The human delegation has heard the Council's decision, Jiho said calmly. We will not contest Statute 7 Alpha. Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. Hannah stared at him like he had lost his mind. However, Jiho continued, his voice carrying despite its quiet tone, humanity must respectfully decline continued participation in the Galactic Council under these terms. Effective immediately, we begin full withdrawal from Council space. All human personnel, assets, technology, and resources will be relocated to independent human systems within 90 days. Now the chamber erupted. Delegates stood, shouting questions and objections. This was impossible. Humans couldn't survive outside Council protection and trade networks. They were bluffing. Ambassador Talvin's scales flushed darker with amusement. Commander Kim, please reconsider this emotional reaction. Where will humanity obtain the resources you need? The trade agreements? The protection from external threats? Jiho met his gaze without flinching. Ambassador Talvin, humanity survived and thrived long before we knew the Council existed. We built everything you see around you. Your hospitals, your stations, your peace agreements. We did this while you called us children. He smiled, but it was cold, calculated. Now you'll discover exactly what you've lost. You need us more than we need you, Vormix declared, his voice booming with certainty. Do we? Jiho asked simply. He gathered his materials and turned to leave. We'll see who needs whom, Chancellor. 90 days. Then, humanity is gone. As the human delegation walked out of the chamber, the aliens watched them go with laughter and dismissive gestures. They had no idea that the foundation of their entire civilization had just decided to leave. The countdown began the moment Commander Jiho Kim's statement reached Earth. 90 days to evacuate humanity from every corner of Council space. Most species thought it was impossible. They were about to learn how humans accomplished impossible things regularly. Admiral Taeyong Park commanded the human defense fleet from the carrier ship Incheon. He received his orders directly from Earth Command with a grim smile. All personnel and assets to be withdrawn. Leave nothing behind. Show them what they're losing. The operation began with quiet efficiency that the galaxy would soon notice. Human merchants across 200 worlds received encrypted messages. Within hours, they started closing shops, selling inventory at massive discounts, and booking passage home. Alien customers complained about losing their favorite suppliers, but thought little of it initially. On the 7th day, the real impact hit. Dr. Una Park, chief of medicine at Sorid General Hospital on their homeworld, submitted her resignation. So did every human doctor, nurse, and medical technician across the Sorid Confederacy. 47 hospitals lost their entire human staff within 24 hours. Ambassador Talvin contacted Commander Kim immediately. "This is unnecessary," he said, trying to maintain his superior tone while worry crept into his voice. "Medical professionals have a duty to their patients. Under Statute 7 Alpha, humans are auxiliary members," Jiho replied calmly. "Our medical licenses are being reviewed for Tier 2 compliance. Rather than work under those restrictions, our medical personnel choose to return home. This is their right." The Sorid hospital system collapsed in 3 days. Emergency rooms overflowed. Surgery schedules fell apart. The Andromeda Plague vaccine production stopped because only human scientists knew the full synthesis process. They had shared some information, but not everything. Now those humans were leaving, and the Sorids discovered their own scientists couldn't replicate the work. Talvin tried again, this time offering concessions. Higher pay, better positions, anything to keep the humans working. Every doctor refused. They had families waiting at home. They had pride too. By week 3, the engineering crisis began. Engineer Una Choi supervised the massive orbital ring circling Nexus Prime. The structure housed 12 million residents and served as the Council's primary trade hub. It was also a marvel of human engineering, built using techniques that humans had developed and other species had borrowed. Una submitted a detailed handover document to the Council Maintenance Division. It explained every system, every backup, every emergency protocol. The Kreshtar engineer who replaced her looked at the documentation with his compound eyes and nodded confidently. "We understand. Thank you for your service." Una left with her entire team. 2 days later, the orbital ring's environmental systems began failing. The Kreshtar engineer frantically reviewed the documentation, realizing too late that understanding something on paper and actually maintaining it were completely different skills. Human engineers didn't just follow procedures, they understood the underlying principles and could adapt when things went wrong. Section 7 lost atmospheric pressure. 10,000 residents evacuated in panic. The Kreshtar team tried to fix it using the manual, but made it worse. Section 12's power grid fluctuated wildly. Water recycling in sections 4 through 9 shut down completely. Within a week, the Council's crown jewel had become partially uninhabitable. 250,000 people evacuated to planetary surfaces below, creating a refugee crisis. Chancellor Vormix demanded answers. His engineers admitted they couldn't fix problems that human teams had handled routinely. The human withdrawal continued with relentless precision. Week 5 brought the diplomatic crisis. Human mediators supervised peace talks in the Outer Rim where the Quilix Federation and Kreshtar Hive had recently ended a brutal war. Human negotiators kept both sides talking, finding compromises, preventing flare-ups. When the mediators left, both sides immediately accused each other of violations. Within hours, border skirmishes resumed. Within days, it became open warfare again. Thousands died in the first week. The Council sent their own mediators, experienced diplomats from long-lived species. They failed completely because they didn't understand what the humans had known, that both sides needed to save face while making concessions. Human mediators had provided that. Council mediators demanded compliance. Trade routes fell apart. The Quilix Federation had relied on human shipping networks that optimized routes using advanced algorithms. When human logistics coordinators left, the Quilix tried to maintain the same networks. They couldn't. Ships arrived late or not at all. Products spoiled in transit. The entire Quilix economy shuddered as supply chains broke down. By week 7, panic spread through Council space. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This was civilizational collapse in slow motion. Every sector where humans had worked now faced critical failures. Security stations on the borders had employed human tactical officers whose experience fighting pirates and raiders kept shipping lanes safe. When they left, pirate attacks increased 300%. Merchant ships burned in space while the Council scrambled to respond. Trade Minister Brekanael, a bird-like Quilix with brilliant blue feathers, requested an emergency session. His voice shook as he presented economic data. Human goods comprised 60% of all interspecies trade. Their departure creates cascading failures across 200 worlds. Food shortages are already appearing on Kreshtar colony worlds. Medical supply chains have broken down across the Saurid Confederacy. Our manufacturing depends on human-designed systems that we cannot operate at full efficiency. The Council chamber, once so confident in its decision, now filled with worried delegates demanding solutions. They had thought humans were just one species among hundreds. They were learning that humans had become the foundation holding everything together. Chancellor Vormix contacted Commander Kim directly. "We are prepared to negotiate," he said stiffly. Statute 7 Alpha could be modified. Humans could receive Tier 1 status immediately. Jiho listened without expression. "Chancellor, humanity is no longer interested in your tier system. We are no longer interested in being part of a council that views species as superior or inferior. We are leaving. You're destroying relationships that took 50 years to build," Vormix said desperately. "No, Chancellor. You destroyed those relationships when you passed Statute 7 Alpha. We're simply accepting what you already decided, that we don't belong in your council." The final week arrived. Human colonies in council space evacuated completely. Entire populations boarded transport ships heading for human-controlled systems beyond council borders. The council watched in growing horror as city after city emptied. Infrastructure stood vacant. The humans weren't taking everything, but what they left behind told a devastating story. Dr. Hannah Lee supervised the final technical handover on Nexus Prime. She provided complete documentation for every system humans had designed. Power plants, water treatment, air recycling, computer networks, everything. The council accepted gratefully, thinking they could manage now with proper documentation. What they didn't realize until later was that humans had designed everything with human intuitive interfaces. Control panels made sense to human minds because they reflected human thinking patterns. The underlying code used human logic structures. An alien engineer could eventually figure it out, but it would take 10 times longer and they would make mistakes that humans never made. On the 90th day, the last human ship crossed the border into independent space. Admiral Taeyong Park stood on the bridge of the Incheon, watching the sensors as his fleet left council territory. Behind them, the galaxy they had helped build for 50 years descended into chaos. Ahead lay human worlds and something new, something better. Commander Jiho Kim sent one final message to the Galactic Council. "We came to you in peace, offering friendship and cooperation. You responded with condescension and theft. You believed your age made you wise, but wisdom is not measured in years. It is measured in how you treat others. We wish you well with the future you have chosen." The council received his message in silence. Already, emergency sessions ran continuously. Already, worlds called for help that couldn't come. Already, they understood their terrible mistake. But understanding came too late. Humanity was gone. 6 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council was dying. Not from war or plague, but from its own incompetence laid bare for everyone to see. The species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia discovered they had forgotten how to actually do things. They had relied on humans for so long that basic skills had atrophied. Chancellor Vormix stood in the Emergency Command Center on Nexus Prime, watching disaster reports scroll across holographic displays. The orbital ring had lost 3 more sections to system failures. Food riots had broken out on 17 Kreshtar colony worlds. The Saurid Confederacy reported 12,000 deaths from diseases that human vaccines had previously prevented. The galaxy was falling apart. How did we not see this coming? He asked the empty room. His species had existed for 40,000 years. They had built empires, won wars, explored countless worlds. Yet in just 6 months without humans, everything crumbled. Ambassador Talvin entered the command center, his green scales dulled by stress and lack of proper rest. The Saurid had aged visibly in these months, the weight of failure crushing his previously arrogant demeanor. The agricultural crisis worsens, he reported quietly. Our farms on the colony worlds used human-designed irrigation systems. Without maintenance, crop yields have dropped 60%. The Kreshtar hive faces starvation. 40 billion insects require constant food supplies that we can no longer guarantee. Vormix slumped in his seat. The Kreshtar were his people. Watching them starve while surrounded by technology they couldn't properly use was torture. What about the engineers we hired? The team studying human documentation. They tried again to restart the fusion reactor on Research Station 7, Talvin said grimly. Another catastrophic failure. The entire moon is now uninhabitable. Radiation will persist for centuries. He paused, struggling with the words. They followed the human manual exactly. But, something went wrong. The human engineer who designed that reactor would have noticed the anomaly and compensated. Our engineers only knew how to follow instructions, not how to truly understand the system. That was the core of their failure, Vormix realized. Humans didn't just build things, they understood them at a fundamental level. They could improvise, adapt, fix problems that weren't in any manual. The council species had become so specialized, so rigid in their thinking over thousands of years, that they had lost that flexibility. I need to go to human space, Talvin said suddenly. I need to see what they've built and ask for help. 3 days later, Talvin led a delegation into independent space. They expected to find struggling human colonies, maybe refugees begging to return to council protection. What they found instead shocked them into silence. The human worlds thrived. New cities sparkled under alien suns. Orbital facilities buzzed with construction activity. Trade ships moved in constant streams between planets. But, most surprising was the diversity. The delegation saw Quilix merchants working alongside human traders. Small luminar communities integrated into human cities. Species that had been marginalized by the Council had found welcome in human space. They called it the Independent Coalition, a loose alliance of species who rejected the Council's hierarchy. Humans provided the organizational structure and technology, but every species contributed as equals. There were no tiers, no auxiliaries, just cooperation based on mutual benefit. Commander Jiho Kim received the delegation in a simple conference room on the human capital world. He didn't make them wait, didn't play power games. He simply sat across from them and asked, "What can I do for you, Ambassador?" Talvin had prepared speeches, carefully crafted arguments and diplomatic approaches. All of that fled his mind faced with Jiho's direct simplicity. "We need help," he admitted. "Our people are dying. We can't maintain the infrastructure you built. We can't solve the problems you used to solve. We made a terrible mistake and now billions suffer for our arrogance." Jiho listened without interrupting. When Talvin finished, he asked one question. Do you understand what you did wrong? We underestimated humanity, Talvin said carefully. We didn't realize how dependent we had become on your skills and knowledge. No, Jiho said firmly. That's not it. Try again. Talvin struggled, looking to his fellow delegates for help. They offered nothing. We treated you unfairly. We took your contributions for granted. Jiho shook his head. You still don't understand. The problem wasn't how you treated humanity specifically. The problem is your entire worldview. You divided the galaxy into superior and inferior species. You believed age equals wisdom and youth equals foolishness. You built a hierarchy where older species ruled and younger species served. That's what's wrong, Ambassador. Not just what you did to us, but the fundamental arrogance of your system. The words hit like physical blows. Talvin had spent centuries believing Saurid culture was superior simply because it was older. The council operated on the assumption that their way was the only right way. They had never questioned whether age actually meant wisdom, whether their traditions actually served any purpose beyond self-congratulation. Until you understand that, Jiho continued, until you genuinely reject that hierarchy and see all species as equals regardless of age or origin, we have nothing to discuss. I won't help you rebuild the same broken system. The delegation returned to council space with empty hands and heavy hearts. Talvin reported the conversation to Chancellor Vormix, who listened with growing understanding and horror. They had been fools, blinded by their own mythology of superiority. Meanwhile, the council continued its collapse. 3 species formally withdrew, joining the independent coalition. The Quilix Federation split, with half their worlds declaring independence and seeking human partnership. Civil unrest erupted across dozens of planets as populations demanded their governments fix the crisis or step down. In desperation, Chancellor Vormix proposed what many called unthinkable. We should take back what is ours, he told the emergency council session. Human technology, human colonies, human resources. They were developed using council infrastructure and support. We have a right to reclaim them. Councillor Mirachelle, a crystalline luminar whose species was among the few voices of reason left, responded with devastating clarity. I commissioned war game simulations, she said, her voice chiming like bells. Every scenario shows the same outcome. Humanity would win. The chamber erupted in protest. Humans were one species. The council comprised hundreds. How could they possibly win? Because they innovate constantly, Mirachelle explained. Our war games assume static capabilities on both sides. But humans don't stay static. Every simulation run showed them developing new tactics, new technologies, new approaches mid-conflict. Our species refined our warfare over millennia and stopped improving. Humans evolve their methods every generation. Their 400 years in space have produced more military innovation than our 40,000. She displayed the simulation results. Every attempted invasion ended in council defeat. Not because humans had better weapons, though they did. Not because they were more numerous, because they weren't. But because they adapted faster than council forces could respond. They turned council strengths into weaknesses and exploited every rigid pattern in council military doctrine. We would lose, Mirachelle concluded simply. And, even if we somehow won, we would inherit dead worlds and destroyed infrastructure. There is no military solution. That night, Vormix sat alone in his chambers, feeling every one of his many years. His people faced starvation. The council faced dissolution. And, it was entirely their own fault. They had created Statute 7 Alpha out of fear and pride. They had driven away the one species that actually made the council function. The final blow came from an unexpected direction. Long-range sensors detected movement at the galaxy's edge, something entering Council space from the void beyond. The signature was familiar, sickeningly so. The Devourers had returned, and, this time, there was no human early warning network to detect them early or human defense grid to hold them back. The Council was about to face an enemy they couldn't defeat, and they would face it alone. The Devourers came from the dark space between galaxies, biomechanical horrors that consumed everything in their path. They ate technology, breaking it down to base components. They consumed organic matter, stripping worlds bare of life. The Council had faced them before, 5 years ago, and barely survived. That time, human early warning systems detected them weeks in advance. Human defense grids channeled them into kill zones. Human tactical coordination turned a potential catastrophe into a manageable threat. Now the humans were gone, and the Devourers returned. Captain Day One Song commanded the human reconnaissance ship Soul's Eye, positioned just outside Council space. His sensors picked up the Devourer vanguard as it entered the outer rim. Thousands of ships, if you could call them that. They looked like twisted combinations of machine and flesh, pulsing with unnatural energy. Report to Coalition Command, Day One ordered. Devourers confirmed. Estimate 30,000 units in first wave. Trajectory suggests they're heading straight for Council core worlds. Back on the human capital world, Admiral Taeyong Park studied the tactical display with grim focus. The Devourer fleet was larger than the previous invasion, and the Council had no defenses prepared. Their first world would fall within days. Dr. Hannah Lee worked frantically in her laboratory, analyzing old Devourer data. The biomechanical entities operated through a distributed neural network, each unit connected to the others. Disrupt that network and they became confused, vulnerable. She had developed a theoretical weapon 5 years ago but never deployed it because the threat ended before it was necessary. The quantum resonance pulse, she explained to Admiral Park. It creates interference in their neural frequencies. But it requires massive coordination across dozens of worlds simultaneously. The timing has to be perfect, down to milliseconds. Can we do it? Park asked. The Coalition can, Hannah said confidently. We've practiced this kind of coordination. The Council? They could never manage it. Too many bureaucratic layers, too much pride preventing real cooperation between species. The first Council world fell on schedule. The planet Kresh 7, home to 2 billion Kreshtar colonists, went dark in 12 hours. The Devourers landed, consumed everything technological, then started on the organic life. Desperate evacuation ships fled into space, many consumed by Devourer interceptors. The Council military responded slowly, hampered by the collapse of their command networks over the past months. By the time they arrived, Kresh 7 was a dead rock. 15 billion Council citizens died in the first month. World after world fell to the relentless advance. The Council military fought bravely but ineffectively, using tactics that hadn't changed in millennia against an enemy that adapted constantly. They learned nothing from their defeats because the species that could have taught them tactical flexibility was gone. Captain Day One Song's reconnaissance fleet monitored the invasion from Coalition borders. The quantum resonance pulse defense activated there, creating an impenetrable barrier of disrupted neural frequencies. Devourer ships that approached Coalition space simply shut down, drifting lifelessly until they were destroyed. The technology worked perfectly. Refugee ships from Council space appeared at Coalition borders daily. Thousands, then, millions of desperate people fleeing the Devourer advance. The Coalition accepted them all, processing refugees with efficiency the Council had never managed. The camps were orderly, supplied, safe. Another demonstration of human organizational capability. Chancellor Vormix watched his civilization die. The mighty Kreshtar hive, 40,000 years old, would be extinct within months at this rate. The Saurid Confederacy had lost 12 core worlds. The Quilix Federation fractured completely as worlds made individual peace with the coalition to gain protection. He sent a message to Commander Ji-Ho Kim. No diplomatic language this time, no careful political maneuvering. Just truth from one leader to another. We were fools. We let pride destroy everything we built. Our people die by billions while we watch helplessly. I know we don't deserve help. I know we earned this fate through our arrogance. But, if you have any compassion, not for us leaders but, for the civilians who had no voice in our decisions, please help us. The message reached Ji-Ho in the middle of a coalition council meeting. The debate was fierce. Many coalition members argued the Galactic Council deserved this fate. They had created Statute 7 Alpha, treated younger species like servants, stolen technology, and shown nothing but contempt for anyone they deemed inferior. Let them face the consequences. Others, particularly the humans, saw it differently. 15 billion dead, Ji-Ho said quietly. Not 15 billion politicians. Not 15 billion council delegates. 15 billion ordinary people. Children. Families. People who never voted for Statute 7 Alpha, who probably never even heard of it. Do they deserve to die for their leaders' mistakes? The debate continued for hours. Some coalition members who had suffered under council rule wanted revenge. They wanted the council species to feel what oppression was like, to understand powerlessness and fear. Ji-Ho understood that anger, even sympathized with it. Then, Ambassador Talvin arrived. He came in a refugee shuttle, not a diplomatic vessel. The proud Saurid ambassador who had once lectured humans about their place looked broken. His scales were dull, his eyes sunken. He had lost weight, probably giving his rations to others. He didn't ask for a formal hearing. He simply walked to the Coalition Council chamber and waited outside. When they let him in, he carried a data chip. I brought footage, he said hoarsely. From the Devourer invasion. You should see what you're debating. The footage played on holographic displays. Children screaming as devourers consumed their homes. Hospitals collapsing while patients still filled the beds. Evacuation ships exploding in atmosphere. Worlds burning. The scale of suffering was incomprehensible. These weren't soldiers dying in battle. These were civilians being slaughtered while their government proved unable to protect them. Talvin watched the footage with them, tears streaming down his scaled face. I helped create Statute 7 Alpha, he said. I believed we were superior. I believed our age made us wise and your youth made you foolish. I was wrong about everything. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't ask for reward or recognition. I ask only that you save those who cannot save themselves. Hate us, despise us, remember forever what we did. But, please don't let children die for our sins. The chamber fell silent. Ji-Ho looked at the Coalition Council members, reading their faces. The anger was still there, the justified rage at how they had been treated. But, also compassion, the understanding that revenge against the guilty would punish the innocent. We need to vote, Ji-Ho said. Not as politicians seeking advantage, but as people deciding what kind of galaxy we want to live in. Do we become what the Council was, holding grudges and letting pride guide our decisions? Or do we show them a better way? The vote took place in absolute silence. One by one, coalition members registered their decision. When the count finished, the result was clear. The coalition would intervene to stop the devourers. But, there would be conditions, terms that would reshape the entire galaxy. The old council had fallen. Something new would rise from its ashes, if they survived. Admiral Park began organizing the largest military operation in human history. Dr. Hannah Lee coordinated the quantum resonance pulse deployment across the coalition and, soon, across council space. Engineer Unit Choi assembled teams to reactivate the defense stations that Council species couldn't operate alone. The battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin, and, this time, humanity would fight not for territory or revenge, but for the principle that all lives mattered equally, regardless of species or age. They would show the Council what true strength looked like, not through domination, but through choosing to help even those who had wronged them. The Devourers were coming, but they would face something they had never encountered before, a united galaxy fighting together as equals. Commander Ji-ho Kim stood before the Coalition Council one final time before the operation began. Representatives from 30 species filled the chamber, refugees from the old Council mixed with Coalition members. They all waited to hear what humanity had decided. "We didn't leave Council space because we hate other species," Ji-ho began. "We left because we refused to accept being treated as inferior. We built a coalition based on equality and mutual respect. Now we face a choice. Do we watch the Council collapse and let billions die to prove a point? Or do we demonstrate what we believe, that all lives have equal value?" He paused, letting his words sink in. The coalition votes to intervene. "We will stop the Devourers. We will save Council civilians. But, we won't restore the system that failed them. We fight for something better." Admiral Taeyong Park commanded the operation from the carrier Incheon. The fleet assembled around him was massive, every coalition warship joined by volunteers from species that had never trusted each other before. Human vessels flew alongside ships from former Council worlds. The quantum resonance pulse required perfect coordination between them all. "First wave deploys in 30 seconds, Park announced. All ships confirm synchronization." Across 50 star systems, coalition forces moved as one. Dr. Hannah Lee had spent weeks coordinating the timing, ensuring every ship activated their pulse generators at exactly the same millisecond. The Devourers relied on their neural network for coordination. Disrupted simultaneously across multiple locations and they became vulnerable. The pulse activated. Across the invasion front, thousands of Devourer ships simply stopped. Their neural connections severed, they drifted in space like dead things. Coalition forces moved in, destroying the disabled enemy with focused fire. But, the Devourers were learning, adapting. They began spacing their forces wider, preventing simultaneous disruption. They developed shielding that partially blocked the pulse. The battle was far from over. The real test came at Nexus Prime. The Devourers sent their main force against the Council capital, intending to break the galaxy's will by destroying its symbolic heart. 50,000 Devourer ships descended on the orbital ring that humanity had built decades ago. Engineer Unit Choi had returned to Nexus Prime with her team, reactivating the defense stations that Council engineers couldn't operate. The systems were damaged from months of neglect, but they still worked. She coordinated their fire while coalition ships engaged in brutal close combat. Admiral Park watched the tactical display as his forces fought outnumbered 10-1. The numbers were impossible, but humans had never let impossible stop them. "All ships, implement Pattern Delta 7, he ordered. Pattern Delta 7 was pure human innovation, developed just weeks ago specifically for this battle. Coalition ships moved in coordinated groups, each group protecting the others while maintaining the quantum pulse field. The Devourers had never faced this tactic before. They adapted quickly, but humans adapted faster. Captain Day One Song's reconnaissance ships identified Devourer command nodes, the central ships that coordinated each battle group. Target those, and entire formations lost cohesion. Human tactical thinking at its finest, finding the enemy's center of gravity and striking it. The battle for Nexus Prime lasted 3 days. The orbital ring suffered damage but held. The Devourers lost 70% of their invasion force. More importantly, they lost momentum. The coalition had stopped their advance. Over the next 3 months, coalition forces pushed the Devourers back system by system. Dr. Hannah Lee refined the quantum pulse, making it more effective with each iteration. Human engineers taught council species how to maintain their own defense networks, patiently explaining principles rather than just procedures. Human tactical officers shared their methods with former council military, breaking down rigid thinking patterns and teaching adaptive strategy. Trillions of lives were saved. Worlds that would have fallen to the devourers stood defended. The coalition didn't just win battles, they showed the council species how to fight effectively. More than that, they demonstrated what cooperation between equals could achieve. When the last devourer ship fled back into dark space, the galaxy stood at a crossroads. The old Galactic Council was gone, shattered beyond repair. Chancellor Vormix had resigned in shame. Most of the old leadership had stepped down or been removed by their own people. Commander Jiho Kim called a meeting on Nexus Prime. Every species sent representatives. The chamber that had once witnessed humanity's humiliation now hosted the birth of something new. The Galactic Council failed because it was built on hierarchy, Jiho said. It assumed some species were better than others, that age equaled wisdom, that youth meant inferiority. That system nearly destroyed the galaxy. We propose something different. He presented the Nexus Accords, a framework for galactic cooperation built on principles the coalition had proven worked. Every species received equal representation regardless of age or size. Technology sharing was voluntary, not mandatory. No species could be classified as inferior. Decisions required consensus, not majority rule that let larger species dominate smaller ones. These accords don't create a government, Jiho explained. They create a framework for cooperation. Each species keeps its sovereignty. But, we work together as equals because that's the only way any of us survive. Ambassador Talvin was the first to sign. The once proud Sorit stood before his fellow delegates and spoke with raw honesty. My species believed we were superior because we were old. We thought our traditions made us wise and human innovation made them dangerous. We were fools. Age without growth is just stagnation. We nearly paid for that arrogance with extinction. He looked directly at Jiho. Humanity saved us even after we rejected them. That's true strength. That's true wisdom. I sign these accords and pledge that the Sorit Confederacy will spend the next 1,000 years proving we learned this lesson. One by one, other species signed. Not everyone was happy. Some felt humanity had too much influence, that the coalition controlled too much. But, the alternative was clear, return to the old system and face certain collapse, or try something new. Chancellor Vormix attended the ceremony but did not sign. He had no authority anymore. But, he approached Jiho privately afterwards. I owe you an apology that words cannot express, the old Kreshtar said. I led my people into disaster through pride and fear. You saved them despite having every reason to let us suffer. That's a debt we can never repay. We don't want repayment, Jiho replied. We want change. Real change, not just words. The galaxy needs to abandon the idea that some species are inherently better than others. If the Kreshtar can help spread that message, that's payment enough. The rebuilding took years. Human engineers worked alongside council species, teaching them not just to maintain systems but to understand them deeply. Human doctors trained new generations of alien medical professionals. Human mediators helped resolve conflicts that had festered for decades. The independent coalition remained separate but cooperative, a reminder that the new galactic order respected diversity of approach. Some species preferred the coalition's looser structure. Others joined the reformed assembly. Both systems traded, shared knowledge, and defended each other. 10 years after Statute 7 Alpha nearly destroyed the galaxy, a memorial ceremony took place on Nexus Prime. Delegates from hundreds of species gathered to honor those lost to both the Devourers and the Council's arrogance. The ceremony was deliberately simple, free of the elaborate hierarchy that had defined council events. Dr. Hannah Lee stood with Commander Ji-ho Kim, watching the diverse crowd. Humans stood beside Saurids, who stood beside Kreshtar, who stood beside Quilix, and dozens of other species. No one wore symbols of rank or superiority. They were all just people, remembering loss and celebrating survival. "They'll remember this," Hannah said quietly. "That humanity saved them even after they rejected us." "Good," Ji-ho replied. "Let them remember that strength isn't about domination. It's about knowing when to stand firm and when to extend your hand. They've learned. Now we build something better together." Across the galaxy, the changes continued. The Nexus Prime Academy reopened, now teaching students from all species using a shared curriculum designed by everyone equally. The first class included humans, Saurids, Kreshtar, Quilix, Luminar, and species that had been too small or young to even have a voice under the old council. Ambassador Talvin, who had retired from politics to become a teacher, stood before that first class. His scales showed his age now, but his eyes held hard-won wisdom. "Today we begin by discussing history," he told the young students. "Specifically, we discussed the greatest mistake our civilization ever made, and the species that taught us wisdom through their absence." He pulled up images of the old council chamber, of Statute 7 Alpha, of the chaos that followed. The students listened with wide eyes, barely able to believe the adults had been so foolish. "We thought being old made us wise," Talvin continued. "We thought we knew everything because we had existed for thousands of years. But wisdom isn't about age. It's about the willingness to learn, to change, to admit when you're wrong. Humanity taught us that lesson. Remember it. Never forget it. Because the moment we start believing we're superior again, we invite disaster." The galaxy had learned its lesson, bought with billions of lives and near total collapse. The Nexus Accords weren't perfect. Arguments still happened. Species still disagreed. But now they disagreed as equals, finding solutions through cooperation rather than domination. And humanity, the young species that had been told they were inferior, stood at the center of it all, not as rulers but as partners. They had won not through conquest but through principle. They had proven that true strength came from lifting others up, not pushing them down. The galaxy was better for it. And it would never forget the price of arrogance, or the value of humility, or the wisdom of treating all beings as equals regardless of how long they had traveled among the stars.